laughed at like trash, but he saw her as a treasure. Sarah grew up in a small town where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. It was the kind of place where people noticed every little mistake you made and remembered it for years. Sarah was a quiet girl. She had always been a little different from the others, not because she wanted to be, but because she didn't fit into the ways other children thought were normal. She loved reading, drawing, and spending time imagining faraway places. She often wrote stories about people doing brave and kind things, people who could change the world in small but important ways. But in her town, imagination was often seen as strange, and being quiet was often seen as weak. From a young age, Sarah had learned to keep her thoughts to herself. At school, some children laughed at the way she dressed, at the way she walked, or even at the way she smiled. It wasn't always mean-spirited, at least not at first. Sometimes it was just thoughtless teasing, but over time the teasing became sharper. There were days when she walked into the classroom and felt eyes on her, waiting for her to do something funny so they could laugh. She would lower her head, clutch her books, and try to disappear into the background. The laughter felt heavy, like it was pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Even outside school, life was not much easier. In her neighborhood, people whispered behind her back. She had neighbors who would point fingers or chuckle when she passed by. Sarah could hear the faint words sometimes, even when they thought she couldn't. "She's weird," they would say. "Look at her hair, her clothes, always daydreaming." It stung, but she tried not to let it show. She had learned early that showing sadness or anger only made people laugh more. So she smiled politely, nodded, and kept walking, her stomach twisting in knots as she went. Despite the constant teasing, Sarah had small refuges where she felt safe. The little library near her home was one of them. It was dusty, quiet, and smelled of old pages, and there she could spend hours lost in stories that took her far from the judgmental eyes of her peers. She would read about brave heroes, clever inventors, and kind people who made the world better. In her imagination, she could be anyone. She could be strong, fearless, and admired. And for a while, that made the world outside seem a little less cruel. Art was another escape. Sarah loved to draw. She didn't care much about what other people thought of her sketches. She drew because it made her heart feel lighter. Sometimes she drew people she saw on the street. Other times she drew things that only existed in her mind. Beautiful skies, magical forests, and creatures that seemed to glow. She would spend hours with her sketchbook open on her lap, pencil moving across the pages, as if each line she drew gave her a little more strength. In her sketches, she was free from judgment. Her imagination didn't care about how other people saw her, and in that freedom she felt alive. Even with these escapes, loneliness was a constant companion. At lunch, she often sat alone, eating quietly while others whispered and giggled. Some kids would invite friends to join them, but never Sarah. She remembered one day, in particular, when a group of classmates had started a game of passing a note, and one of them wrote a cruel joke about her. They passed the note around the room, laughing loudly every time it touched her desk. Sarah's face burned with shame and humiliation. She wanted to cry, but she didn't. Instead, she packed her things quickly and left the classroom, her heart pounding, tears threatening to spill but her pride stopping them. Her family tried to comfort her. Her mother would tell her, "Don't let them see you cry. You are special in your own way." Her father would say, "One day they will realize how wrong they are." But words, as kind as they were, could not erase the daily sting of ridicule. At home, Sarah sometimes felt like she had to hide too. Her younger siblings were loud and full of energy, and their constant chatter reminded her of the noise of the outside world, the laughter of children at school. So she retreated further into her imagination and her sketchbook, where she could be alone without anyone mocking her dreams. Sarah also had small moments of doubt about herself. She wondered if there was something wrong with her. Maybe she was too quiet, too shy, too awkward. Maybe the way she dreamed and imagined made her strange. These thoughts would creep in late at night when the house was silent and her siblings were asleep. She would stare at the ceiling and ask herself why life seemed harder for people like her, people who just wanted to be seen for who they truly were. But even in these moments of doubt, she never gave up completely. There was a quiet fire in her heart, a hope that one day someone would see her, really see her, and not laugh. School projects were always difficult for her. Group work meant facing the possibility of ridicule. Sometimes she tried to participate, but the other children would ignore her ideas or make jokes about them. It was discouraging, and she learned to contribute quietly, sometimes not at all. Yet there were glimpses of joy when she created something beautiful. A well-written essay, a painting that captured emotion, a story that made a teacher smile. These small victories were like sparks of light in a dark room. They reminded Sarah that she was capable, that her worth wasn't defined by the laughter of others. Despite the challenges, Sarah remained kind. She helped younger children at school, offered her seat to someone who needed it, and shared her small lunches with those who had none. She never retaliated against the laughter or cruelty of others. She believed that being kind and true to herself was more important than trying to fit into the mold of people who didn't understand her. And even though it was difficult, she hoped that one day someone would notice the goodness in her, the talent she carried, and the heart that refused to harden even in the face of ridicule. One of the hardest parts of Sarah's life was feeling invisible. She longed for friendship, for someone to talk to who wouldn't laugh at her dreams or mock her for being different. Sometimes she imagined having a best friend who would understand her, who would encourage her art and writing, who would see her as more than just a quiet, shy girl. And though it seemed impossible at times, that small hope was always there, tucked quietly in her heart. And so Sarah's days continued, a mixture of hardship and quiet resilience. She faced the laughter, the whispers, and the judgment of her town, but she never let it completely destroy her spirit. Her art, her writing, and her imagination were shields that protected her, giving her the strength to keep moving forward. She didn't yet know that one day, someone would come into her life who would not see her as strange or weak, but as a treasure worth valuing. But for now, she continued, walking with her sketchbook under her arm, her head held a little higher each day, even if only in secret. Sarah's story in these early years was not about triumph or recognition. It was about survival, about learning to protect her heart, and about holding on to hope even when the world seemed determined to dismiss her. And though she often felt like trash, discarded by those around her, she carried a spark inside, a spark that refused to go out. That spark, quiet and small as it was, would one day guide her towards someone who would see her true worth. Even on the days when laughter followed her, when cruel words echoed in her ears, Sarah learned an important lesson. Being unseen did not mean being worthless. She discovered that her imagination, her kindness, and her talents were treasures she carried within herself, treasures that no ridicule could ever take away. And it was this understanding, however faint and fragile, that kept her walking forward day after day, sketchbook in hand, heart quietly hoping for the day someone would truly see her. Sarah's days were often long and tiring, filled with challenges that seemed small to others but enormous to her. Every morning she woke up with a mixture of hope and dread. She hoped that today might be different, that maybe, just maybe, someone would see her for who she truly was. But as soon as she stepped outside her door, reality would remind her that life could still be cruel. The streets of her small town were crowded with familiar faces, some kind and some not. And the not-so-kind faces were the ones she seemed to notice the most. At school, every day was a test of patience and courage. The teasing that had started years ago had become almost a routine, a part of the environment she had grown up in. Children would whisper behind her back, laugh when she passed, or copy her gestures in a mocking way. There were teachers who seemed to notice but didn't intervene, leaving her to deal with the sting of humiliation on her own. Sarah often found herself asking why people could be so cruel when kindness was far easier. She would write these thoughts in her journal, sometimes drawing small illustrations of a girl standing tall despite the storm around her. Lunchtimes were the hardest. Sarah would carry her lunch carefully from home, hoping to find a quiet corner where no one would notice her. Yet somehow, she always ended up being the center of attention for the wrong reasons. One day, a group of classmates had started a game of tossing crumbs near her feet, giggling every time she flinched. Another day, someone had placed a fake note in her bag, pretending it was from a secret admirer but filled with cruel words instead. Each incident left her feeling smaller and more invisible. She learned to eat quickly, smile politely, and pretend it didn't hurt, even though her stomach twisted with anxiety. Despite these hardships, Sarah had moments of quiet resilience. She refused to let the teasing completely shape her identity. In her own way, she fought back by holding onto her interests and passions. Her love for art and writing became a shield, protecting her from the harshness of the world. She carried her sketchbook everywhere, drawing whenever she had a free moment. Even if no one else appreciated her work, she found joy in the process. Each pencil stroke, each color blended carefully on the page, was a small victory against the world that seemed determined to bring her down. Her evenings were often spent alone in her room, where she could finally let her thoughts flow freely. She would write stories about people overcoming challenges, about friendships that lifted spirits, and about kindness that changed lives. In her imagination, she was never the girl laughed at or ignored. She was brave, confident, and full of life. Writing and drawing allowed her to explore emotions she could not express openly. Sometimes she would read her stories aloud to herself, hearing the strength in her own voice, feeling a small sense of power return to her heart. Family life was both comforting and challenging. Her parents loved her deeply and tried to protect her from the cruelty of the outside world. Her mother often reminded her, "Sarah, the world will not always understand you, but that doesn't mean you are any less special." Her father would say, "Keep doing what makes you happy. The right people will notice your worth." Yet, despite their words, Sarah sometimes felt misunderstood at home too. Her siblings were noisy and energetic, always in motion, always demanding attention. It was not that she disliked them, but she often craved silence, a space where she could breathe and think without interruptions. Even with these challenges, Sarah's inner strength continued to grow. She began noticing small victories in her daily life, moments that reminded her she was capable of more than she realized. One day, she had completed a school assignment with extra care, drawing diagrams and adding colors to make it more interesting. When the teacher praised her effort, it was the first time in weeks that someone had acknowledged her work without ridicule. That small recognition gave her a sense of pride and reminded her that her efforts mattered. Social interactions remained complicated. While many children laughed or ignored her, there were occasional glimpses of kindness that lifted her spirits. A classmate might compliment her drawing quietly, or a teacher might encourage her to share her story with the class. These small moments were rare but precious, like drops of sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. Sarah clung to these moments, storing them in her heart, knowing they were proof that the world was not entirely cruel. Sarah also learned the importance of self-reflection. She spent hours thinking about why people acted the way they did, why some seemed so eager to hurt others with their words or actions. She realized that often, the cruelty she faced had more to do with the insecurities of others than with her own shortcomings. This understanding gave her a sense of clarity and strength. She began to remind herself that she was not defined by the opinions of those who laughed at her, but by her own actions, her kindness, and her talents. Despite the isolation, Sarah remained hopeful for connections she had yet to find. She imagined having friends who would accept her, who would encourage her dreams, and who would not judge her for being different. She pictured herself laughing with someone who truly understood her, someone who saw the treasure she carried inside, even if the rest of the world couldn't see it yet. This hope, though fragile, became a guiding light that helped her navigate the daily challenges of school and life. Sarah's routine often involved balancing school, her personal passions, and family responsibilities. She helped her mother with household chores, assisted her younger siblings with their homework, and still found time to immerse herself in her art and writing. This balance was delicate, but she managed it with quiet determination. Each day, she proved to herself that she was capable of handling life's difficulties while nurturing her dreams. The world outside, however, continued to test her patience and resilience. There were days when the teasing felt unbearable, when her confidence wavered, and when she questioned whether her kindness and talent were enough to protect her from ridicule. But even in these moments of doubt, she refused to give up completely. She reminded herself that her worth was not measured by the laughter of others, but by the strength she carried within her. Sarah also discovered that small acts of courage could have a big impact on her self-esteem. One day, she decided to raise her hand in class despite her fear of being laughed at. She answered a question correctly, and the teacher praised her. Though some classmates snickered, she felt a surge of confidence. It was a small step, but it marked the beginning of a shift in how she saw herself. She realized that courage did not always have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet and personal, a choice to believe in oneself despite fear. Friendship remained a complicated dream. Sarah longed for someone who would not see her as strange or weak, but would appreciate her uniqueness. She observed other children forming bonds, laughing together, and supporting each other, and she imagined what it would be like to be part of that world. These observations were bittersweet. They reminded her of what she lacked, but also fueled her determination to keep going, to keep nurturing her talents and her kindness until the right person came into her life. Her art and writing became not only a refuge, but also a way to process her emotions. Whenever she felt hurt, lonely, or misunderstood, she would pour her feelings onto paper. Drawing, sketching, and writing allowed her to express what she could not say aloud. She created worlds where people were kind, where dreams were valued, and where differences were celebrated. These creative acts strengthened her spirit, reminding her that even if the outside world did not recognize her worth, she could recognize it herself. Sarah's quiet resilience began to show in other ways too. She developed a sense of empathy for others who seemed misunderstood or overlooked. She would notice classmates who were shy or struggling and offer them small gestures of kindness, a smile, a word of encouragement, or sharing materials they needed. In doing so, she realized that even small acts could make a difference in someone else's life. This understanding gave her a sense of purpose, a reason to continue being kind even when it was difficult. The journey was far from easy. Every day brought new challenges, new moments of doubt, and new instances of ridicule. But through it all, Sarah continued to grow stronger. She learned to find beauty in small victories, to take pride in her talents, and to hold on to hope for a future where she would be seen and valued for who she truly was. Each day she survived, each challenge she overcame, added to her inner strength, shaping her into someone capable of facing life's hardships with courage and grace. And so, Sarah continued her journey, walking through the daily struggles with quiet determination. She carried her sketchbook everywhere, wrote in her journal whenever she could, and held onto the hope that one day, someone would see her as more than the girl laughed at and ignored. Though the world had not yet recognized her treasure, she knew deep inside that it existed, waiting for the right eyes to discover it. And that belief, fragile yet persistent, became the guiding force that kept her moving forward, day after day, toward the life she dreamed of. Sarah had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of her days, where moments of small joy were often overshadowed by teasing and judgment. She moved through her school and neighborhood with a mixture of caution and hope, always looking for glimpses of kindness in a world that had often been unkind. But one ordinary day, a small change arrived, one that she would later realize would begin to shift her life in ways she had only dared to imagine. It was a sunny afternoon, and Sarah had decided to spend a little extra time in the small library near her home. She loved the library because it was quiet, filled with the smell of old books and the soft rustle of pages turning. Here, she could escape from the laughter and whispers that seemed to follow her elsewhere. She found a corner near the window and settled with her sketchbook, pencils, and a story she had been working on for weeks. The sunlight fell gently on the pages, and for the first time in the day, she felt a sense of peace. As she sketched, lost in the lines of her drawing, a voice broke her concentration. "That's really good," the voice said softly. Sarah looked up, startled. There, standing by the bookshelf, was a boy she had seen around school but never spoken to. His expression was warm, his eyes sincere. He wasn't smiling in a mocking way as so many had before. He was genuinely impressed. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat, unsure how to respond. Most people didn't notice her, and when they did, it was rarely kind. "I thank you," she murmured, feeling a little shy. Her pencil hovered over the page as she tried to continue her sketch without drawing attention to herself. The boy didn't seem deterred by her hesitation. "I mean it," he said. "You have real talent. I've never seen anyone draw like this before. It's amazing how detailed it is." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long time, someone had spoken to her with genuine admiration rather than mockery or indifference. She blinked, unsure if she deserved such praise. I just like drawing," she said quietly. "That's the best reason to do it," he replied with a smile. "I'm Omar, by the way. I've seen you around school, but I never knew you drew like this. You should show more people. Your work is too good to keep hidden." Sarah's cheeks flushed. The idea of showing her work to others was frightening. She had been laughed at before, her drawings mocked, her writing ignored. Yet Omar's words felt different. They weren't meant to ridicule, they were meant to encourage. I'm Sarah," she whispered. From that moment, a new chapter began in her life, though she didn't realize it yet. Omar began visiting the library more often, and he would often find Sarah quietly sketching or reading. He never interrupted her work, but he always took the time to acknowledge it, to ask questions about her stories, and to genuinely listen when she spoke. He asked about the characters she created, the worlds she imagined, and the dreams she carried quietly in her heart. Each conversation, no matter how small, felt like a spark of light in a world that had often seemed gray. Omar's presence was gentle, never overwhelming. He didn't demand that she speak or share more than she was comfortable with. Instead, he offered encouragement in small, meaningful ways. When Sarah showed him a sketch, he would study it carefully, pointing out details she hadn't even noticed herself. When she read a story aloud, he would listen attentively, asking thoughtful questions that made her feel seen and valued. Slowly, Sarah began to feel something she hadn't felt in years: confidence. The more time she spent with Omar, the more she realized that he genuinely cared about understanding her. He never laughed at her for being quiet, never made fun of her ideas, and never compared her to anyone else. For Sarah, who had spent so long feeling invisible, this acceptance was like a gentle breeze after a long, harsh winter. She found herself smiling more often, feeling lighter, and even daring to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be appreciated for who she truly was. Omar also encouraged Sarah to think about sharing her work beyond the safety of her sketchbook and journal. "People would love to see your art," he said one day. "Even if they don't, it's not about them, it's about expressing yourself. Your work is part of who you are, and you should be proud of it." Sarah felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The idea of exposing her creativity to the world was terrifying, but Omar's calm confidence made her feel like she could try. Their friendship grew naturally, built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. Omar never pushed her, but he offered gentle guidance whenever she was unsure. He introduced her to new ideas, showed her online art communities where people shared their work respectfully, and even suggested ways she could improve her techniques if she wanted to. Sarah began experimenting with new styles and stories, exploring her talents in ways she had never dared before. It wasn't just her art that began to grow. Sarah noticed a change within herself. She felt braver, more willing to speak up, and more willing to believe in her own worth. The constant pressure of ridicule from school and the neighborhood still lingered, but it no longer defined her. With Omar's encouragement, she began to separate her sense of self from the opinions of those who had laughed at her. She realized that her value wasn't determined by the world's judgment, but by her own efforts, her kindness, and her creativity. Omar also helped Sarah see that kindness could have a ripple effect. He shared stories about people who had made a difference through small acts of encouragement and support. Sometimes, just noticing someone's effort can change their whole world, he said. Sarah thought about her own experiences and realized how deeply words of appreciation and understanding could affect someone. She began to pay more attention to the small moments of connection around her, appreciating the gestures that showed she was not entirely alone. Over time, Sarah began to open up more, sharing not only her work but also her thoughts and dreams. She talked about her hope to create stories that could inspire others, to draw images that captured beauty and emotion, and to one day show the world that being different was not a weakness but a strength. Omar listened with genuine interest, never dismissing her ideas or dreams. For the first time, Sarah felt like someone was rooting for her, someone who believed in her potential even when she doubted herself. This friendship, though quiet and understated, began to have a profound impact on Sarah's life. She started to notice changes in her daily routine. She walked with her head held a little higher, even when passing those who had once mocked her. She raised her hand in class more often, answered questions, and contributed ideas without fear of ridicule. Each small act of courage, each moment of self-expression, felt like a victory, a step toward becoming the person she had always wanted to be. One afternoon, as they sat together in the library, Omar handed her a small notebook. "I thought you might like this," he said. "You can try new sketches, new stories, whatever you like. Keep experimenting, keep dreaming." Sarah accepted it with wide eyes, feeling a surge of gratitude. The notebook was simple, but it represented something far greater, a belief in her talent and a recognition of her worth. In that moment, she realized that Omar didn't just see her art. He saw her as a person, someone valuable and capable, someone with hidden treasures waiting to shine. The presence of Omar in her life began to subtly shift how Sarah viewed herself. She started noticing qualities she had overlooked before: her determination, her imagination, her ability to persevere despite challenges. She began to understand that being laughed at by others did not diminish her value. She also learned to trust her instincts, to listen to her own voice rather than the mocking echoes of those who didn't understand her. This growing self-awareness gave her strength and a sense of empowerment she had never known before. Sarah's days, once dominated by fear and ridicule, gradually included moments of excitement and possibility. She would wake up looking forward to seeing Omar, to sharing a new sketch or story, and to discussing ideas with someone who genuinely appreciated her efforts. These interactions, though simple, became the foundation for a renewed sense of self. She realized that her life could change not because the world suddenly became kind, but because someone had chosen to see her as a treasure, someone had chosen to believe in her when she was unsure of herself. By the end of that year, Sarah had grown in confidence and skill. She shared some of her work online, receiving encouragement from people who appreciated her creativity. She began to feel a sense of pride in her achievements, understanding that her value was not defined by those who had once laughed at her. And through it all, Omar remained a steady presence, quietly supporting her growth, celebrating her victories, and reminding her that she was more than the hardships she had endured. Through this connection, Sarah began to understand an important truth. Being seen, truly seen, could change a person's life. She realized that while ridicule and judgment could wound, recognition, encouragement, and belief in one's abilities could heal, empower, and transform. In Omar, she found not just a friend, but a mirror reflecting her true worth, showing her the treasure she had carried inside all along. And so, Sarah's journey continued, now accompanied by someone who truly understood her. The laughter and judgment of the past still existed, but it no longer held the same power over her. She had discovered that even in a world that often mocked and ignored, there could be moments of understanding, recognition, and support, moments that could light the darkest days and guide her toward a future filled with hope and possibility. Sarah's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. After meeting Omar, the world no longer seemed quite as cold and unkind. His encouragement had sparked something inside her, a quiet confidence that grew with each passing day. For the first time, she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be appreciated for who she truly was. She still faced the same teasing and whispers from classmates, but now those voices didn't hold the same weight over her. They were like background noise she could choose to ignore. She began spending more time in the library, where she felt safe to explore her passions without judgment. Drawing, sketching, and writing were no longer just ways to escape. They became ways to express herself and share her vision with the world. She experimented with new ideas, mixing colors in ways she had never dared before, creating stories with characters who overcame challenges and learned important lessons. Each creation made her feel a little stronger, a little more confident, and a little more proud of who she was becoming. One day, Omar suggested that she try sharing her work with a wider audience. Even if only one person sees it and appreciates it, it's worth it, he said. Your talent is a gift, Sarah. Don't keep it hidden. She felt a flutter of fear in her chest. Sharing her work meant opening herself up to judgment, criticism, or even ridicule. But with Omar's words echoing in her mind, she decided to take a small step. She posted a few of her drawings on a safe online community for artists. The response was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. People praised her creativity, her attention to detail, and the emotions her art conveyed. For the first time, Sarah felt validated. She realized that the ridicule she had endured was not a reflection of her talent or worth, but the narrow minds of those who failed to see her potential. The encouragement she received online, combined with Omar's consistent support, gave her a newfound confidence she had never experienced before. At school, things began to shift subtly as well. Some of her classmates noticed her improved confidence and her growing skills. They were curious about the sketches she carried and the stories she whispered to herself. While not everyone understood or appreciated her work, she began to stand taller in her presence, speaking up more in class and sharing ideas without fear. It was not easy. Old habits of self-doubt occasionally returned, but each small act of courage reinforced her belief in herself. Sarah also discovered that confidence could inspire others. Younger students began approaching her for advice on their own art and writing. They admired her patience, her skill, and her willingness to share tips and encouragement. For the first time, Sarah realized that her struggles had not only made her stronger but had also given her empathy. She understood what it felt like to be overlooked and laughed at, and she wanted to help others feel seen and valued. Through teaching and encouraging, she became a source of inspiration herself. Omar remained a steady presence in her life, celebrating her victories and gently guiding her through setbacks. Whenever she doubted herself or felt afraid of showing her work, he reminded her of the talent and determination she possessed. "You're capable of more than you know," he would say. "Don't let anyone, including yourself, limit what you can do." With his encouragement, Sarah began taking small risks, submitting her work to local competitions, participating in school art shows, and even sharing her stories with teachers and classmates. Her family noticed the changes too. Her parents were proud of the quiet transformation they saw in their daughter. She smiled more often, spoke with confidence, and carried herself with a sense of purpose that had been missing before. Her siblings, who had once teased her playfully, now looked at her with admiration. Even the neighbors who had whispered and laughed at her seemed to notice that something about Sarah had changed, though they could not quite put their finger on it. Sarah began to understand the power of perseverance. The ridicule she had faced for so many years had not disappeared, but it no longer defined her. She had learned to recognize her own value and to trust in her abilities. Each time she overcame a challenge or shared her work successfully, she felt a sense of accomplishment that made the old fears and doubts shrink. She realized that growth was not about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them with courage and determination. Her art and writing continued to evolve. She experimented with new techniques, new subjects, and new forms of storytelling. She drew from her experiences, turning moments of struggle into inspiration. The teasing and judgment that had once hurt her became a source of motivation, reminding her of how far she had come. Each creation was a testament to her resilience, her imagination, and her determination to be seen as more than what others had labeled her. Sarah's confidence also affected her social interactions. She began to form genuine friendships with a few classmates who shared her interests. She discovered that when she approached others with kindness and openness, they responded in kind. These friendships, though small in number, were meaningful and enriching. They reminded her that while some people might mock or ignore, there were also those who could understand, appreciate, and support her. Omar continued to play a vital role in her journey. He introduced her to new ideas, encouraged her to pursue her dreams, and reminded her that she was capable of achieving more than she had ever imagined. Their conversations often revolved around her goals, her art, and her stories, but they also included discussions about life, courage, and self-belief. Through his guidance, Sarah learned to balance humility with confidence, to remain kind while standing firm, and to pursue her passions without fear of judgment. By the end of the year, Sarah had achieved milestones she had once thought impossible. She had showcased her artwork in a local exhibition, received positive feedback from teachers and community members, and built an online presence where her creations were appreciated. She had taken the first steps toward pursuing her dreams openly, without hiding in fear. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, reinforced her belief in herself and her potential. More importantly, Sarah had grown in self-awareness and self-acceptance. She recognized that being laughed at or ignored in the past did not diminish her worth. She had discovered her own strength, her ability to persevere, and her capacity to create beauty and inspire others. The girl who had once felt invisible was now beginning to understand that her uniqueness was not a weakness, but a gift, a treasure waiting to be shared with the world. Even when challenges arose, Sarah faced them with renewed courage. There were still moments of self-doubt, teasing, or fear, but she had developed tools to navigate them. She reminded herself of her progress, reflected on her achievements, and sought guidance from Omar and others who supported her. These practices allowed her to maintain her confidence and continue growing, even in the face of obstacles. Through this period of recognition and growth, Sarah began to dream bigger. She imagined creating stories that could touch the hearts of many, drawings that could inspire others, and a life where she could pursue her passions without fear. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It was the courage to share it, the perseverance to continue despite setbacks, and the support of those who believed in her that made her journey meaningful. Sarah's journey also taught her the importance of gratitude. She appreciated Omar's belief in her, her family's support, and the small acts of kindness she encountered along the way. These experiences reminded her that while the world could be harsh, it could also be beautiful and supportive. Recognizing this balance gave her a sense of perspective, allowing her to navigate life with grace and confidence. As the months passed, Sarah began to feel a sense of empowerment she had never known before. She walked through her school halls with her head held higher, smiled at classmates without fear, and carried herself with quiet pride. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that there would always be challenges to face, but she also knew that she had the strength, talent, and support to continue growing. The transformation in Sarah's life was not sudden, but gradual, a result of perseverance, encouragement, and self-discovery. Each small step she took, each risk she dared to make, and each act of courage added to her confidence and sense of self-worth. She had learned that true growth came from within, and that the recognition and support of others could amplify, but never replace her own belief in herself. By the end of this chapter of her life, Sarah had become a different person from the girl who had once felt invisible and ridiculed. She had embraced her talents, nurtured her passions, and built connections with people who valued and respected her. She had discovered that the world could be kinder than she had thought, and that her dreams, once hidden in the pages of a journal and the sketches in a notebook, could take shape and be shared with others. And so, Sarah continued her journey with a sense of purpose and optimism. She had faced years of ridicule and doubt, but she had emerged stronger, more confident, and ready to embrace the opportunities that lay ahead. She had learned that her worth was not defined by the laughter of others, but by her own talents, perseverance, and the kindness she carried in her heart. With each new day, she moved closer to the life she had always imagined, a life where she was not just seen, but celebrated for the treasure she had always been. Sarah had come a long way from the girl who once felt invisible and laughed at. The world that had once seemed harsh and unforgiving now felt a little brighter, a little kinder, because she had begun to see her own worth. The encouragement from Omar, the small victories she had achieved, and the moments of recognition she had earned had all combined to help her realize something she had long suspected but never truly believed. She was not trash, not invisible, not worthless. She was a treasure. Her days had transformed. She walked with a quiet confidence, smiling at the world with the knowledge that she was capable, talented, and resilient. School no longer felt like a battleground to survive. It became a place where she could grow and share her creativity. She raised her hand in class, offering ideas and opinions without fear of ridicule. Even when someone laughed or made a snide comment, she no longer allowed it to diminish her. Instead, she smiled politely and moved forward, knowing that their opinion did not define her. Sarah's art and writing had become a central part of her life. She no longer hid her sketchbook or journal in secret. She shared her work with friends, teachers, and online communities where her creativity was appreciated. People admired her skill, her attention to detail, and the emotions her art conveyed. She received messages of encouragement from strangers who had seen her work and felt inspired. These messages, though small, meant the world to her. They reminded her that the treasures she carried inside were meant to be shared and could touch the lives of others. Her friendship with Omar continued to be a source of strength. He remained her quiet supporter, encouraging her, celebrating her victories, and helping her navigate challenges. But Sarah also realized that she no longer needed someone to define her worth. Omar had helped her discover what was already inside her, the talent, the courage, and the heart to face life's difficulties. She had learned to value herself, and that knowledge gave her freedom. One day, the school announced an art competition open to all students. Sarah felt a familiar flutter of nerves in her chest. She remembered the time she had tried to share her work before, only to be laughed at or ignored. But she also remembered the words of Omar and the support she had received from friends and online followers. This time, she decided she would participate, not for anyone else but for herself. She poured her heart into her piece, sketching a scene of a girl standing under a bright sky, surrounded by symbols of hope and courage. Every line reflected her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. When the day of the competition arrived, Sarah felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She placed her work among the others, unsure how it would be received. As the judges examined the pieces, she held her breath, silently hoping that her art would be appreciated. When the results were announced, she could hardly believe her ears. She had won first place. The applause from the audience was overwhelming, but more than that, she felt a deep, personal satisfaction. She had faced her fears, expressed herself, and been recognized not for who she had once been, but for who she had become. This victory marked a turning point. Sarah realized that she did not need to seek validation from those who had once laughed at her. She had built confidence, honed her talents, and surrounded herself with people who saw her value. The ridicule and judgment of the past no longer had power over her. She was proud of herself, and that pride was far more meaningful than any approval she could receive from others. Her confidence began to spill over into other areas of her life. She joined the school's art club and began collaborating with other students on creative projects. She discovered that working with others did not mean losing herself or hiding her talents. It meant sharing her gifts and learning from others. Her friends admired her dedication, her skill, and her kindness. For the first time, Sarah experienced a sense of belonging, not because she had changed to fit in, but because she had embraced who she truly was. Sarah's family noticed the transformation as well. Her parents beamed with pride at the young woman she had become. Her siblings looked up to her, seeking advice and inspiration from someone they had once teased. Her mother would often tell her, "Sarah, you've always been special. Now the world can see it too." Her father added, "The treasure was always inside you. You just had to discover it." Their words reinforced what Sarah had come to understand on her own. She was valuable, capable, and deserving of recognition. In her neighborhood, too, perceptions began to shift. People who had once whispered or laughed started noticing her talent and dedication. Some classmates who had ignored or mocked her now approached her with curiosity and respect. While Sarah did not seek revenge or recognition from them, she appreciated the change. She had learned that true confidence did not come from making others see your worth, but from believing in yourself regardless of what others thought. Sarah's journey also inspired her to help others who struggled with self-doubt and ridicule. She began mentoring younger students who faced similar challenges, offering encouragement and sharing her experiences. She showed them that being different was not a weakness, that creativity and kindness were treasures, and that perseverance and belief in oneself could lead to growth and recognition. Through these acts, Sarah realized that her own struggles had given her empathy and the ability to make a positive impact on others. Her art and writing continued to evolve. She experimented with new techniques, subjects, and storytelling styles. She drew inspiration from her life experiences, turning moments of challenge into symbols of strength and beauty. Each creation was a reflection of her journey, from being laughed at and overlooked to being recognized and valued. Her work carried a message of hope, resilience, and self-belief, reaching people who had faced similar struggles. Sarah's confidence also allowed her to dream bigger. She envisioned a future where she could pursue her passions openly and freely, creating art and stories that inspired and encouraged others. She thought about attending art school, participating in exhibitions, and sharing her work on larger platforms. She realized that her journey had prepared her for these opportunities, not just her talent, but her courage, perseverance, and belief in herself. Even as she embraced success and recognition, Sarah remained humble and kind. She understood the importance of supporting others, of offering encouragement and sharing knowledge. She continued to value the small acts of kindness that had helped her along the way, and she became someone who could provide the same support to others. Her life had come full circle, from a girl who felt invisible and laughed at, to a young woman who saw her worth and helped others recognize theirs. Sarah also reflected on her relationship with Omar. Their friendship had been the catalyst for her growth, but she had learned that her self-worth did not depend solely on anyone else. Omar had helped her see the treasure she carried within herself, but she had nurtured and embraced that treasure on her own. She was grateful for his presence, but she now understood that the true source of her strength came from within. One evening, as Sarah sat in her room, sketching under the soft glow of her desk lamp, she thought about how far she had come. She remembered the days when she had felt invisible, laughed at, and ridiculed. She remembered the fear, the self-doubt, and the loneliness. And she remembered the small sparks of hope, the quiet encouragement from Omar, the moments of personal achievement, and the joy of expressing herself through art and writing. Each memory reminded her of the journey she had undertaken, the growth she had achieved, and the treasure she had discovered within herself. Sarah realized that life was not always easy, and challenges would continue to arise. But she had learned the tools to face them: resilience, self-belief, courage, and kindness. She understood that being laughed at or judged did not define her, that her talents, her heart, and her perseverance were far more important. She had learned to navigate the world with confidence, embracing both her strengths and her vulnerabilities. Her story became a testament to the power of self-discovery, resilience, and the importance of being seen for who you truly are. Sarah knew that not everyone in the world would understand or appreciate her, but that did not matter. What mattered was that she had discovered her own worth, embraced her talents, and found people who valued her. She had learned that treasures are not always recognized immediately, but they remain precious and valuable, waiting for the right eyes to discover them. In the end, Sarah stood tall, both figuratively and literally. She had transformed from a girl laughed at and overlooked into a young woman who recognized her value, embraced her talents, and pursued her dreams with courage and determination. She had learned that her worth was not defined by others, but by her own actions, her kindness, her creativity, and her belief in herself. And she knew that this was only the beginning of her journey, one that would continue to grow, inspire, and shine brightly. Sarah's life was no longer defined by ridicule or doubt. It was defined by creativity, courage, and the quiet power of self-belief. She had discovered the treasure within herself, nurtured it, and allowed it to shine. And she knew, without a doubt, that anyone who truly looked would see it too. A treasure hidden in plain sight, no longer invisible, no longer laughed at, but shining brightly for the world to admire.